For the L&D teams, the success of any workplace learning related initiative, whether it's the building of a new e-learning course, a classroom session, investment in an LMS, it depends almost entirely on the success or achieving the learning outcomes. Just making the investment in an initiative or even completing it does not guarantee the success unless those learning outcomes have been very clearly met. So how does the L&D leader really go about building a system that can objectively measure the learning outcomes? Our guest today helps us out with exactly that.
Yatish is an MBA from the Asian Institute of Management at Manila. He is a certified coach as well as certified in the space of design thinking from the Darden School of Business, University of Virginia. He currently runs an outfit called Yogi Campus, wherein he works at leadership and career coaching, talent development consulting, as well as specifically training and mentoring in the retail industry. Prior to Yogi Campus, Yatish has worked in several leadership roles in the industry. He was with Lifestyle International, Franklin Covey International, Aditya Birla Center for Retail Excellence, the Friedman Group, amongst several others. Yatish is also a visiting faculty and a consultant at several B schools. Yatish, thank you so much for your time this morning. We are super delighted and lucky to have you. And the question, for us that we want to deliberate upon this morning specifically is in the space of measuring learning outcomes. Quick background, if you look at every organization, right, beyond a certain size and geographical spread, they all invest in building a learning program, like put together a learning L&D team, have a calendar of learning skilling courses, getting the staff to undergo a certain amount of hours of training every week, every quarter, every year. And obviously, all that is absolutely necessary for any L&D team to succeed. However, what we've seen is that just doing these activities alone will rarely ensure learning outcomes or the positive effectiveness of the learning, right? And unless the L&D leader understands and the impact of these initiatives, they really have no basis to really go back and ask for something additional, right? Okay, we want to do these additional programs or this initiative extra, or we want to get these courses built, right? So really, the point question is that how does an L&D leader really go about building an ecosystem that can really objectively measure the learning outcomes of the L&D initiatives? Yatish.
The first thing we began any learning initiative was by defining the learning outcome. It typically happens that when there is a need for some kind of a training program, the operations or any other stakeholder will come to the learning team and say, "Hey, we want to do this training program," right?
True.
And the learning teams normally jump at the opportunity and say, "Okay, we'll design a learning program and we'll deliver it." What invariably gets missed in most cases is to define what the learning outcome is. Neither the stakeholder who is asking for it nor the learning team would pause for a minute to say, "Hey, let's try and define what learning objectives are. What do you want to accomplish from this initiative?" And even if it is done, it's not very well articulated. So I think the first step in designing any learning initiative is to clearly define the learning outcomes, articulate it to as much granularity as possible.
Okay.
For example, you say that, okay, if I want my new hires to be trained, then what is it that I want my new hires to be demonstrating, let's say immediately after this training, or let's say 2 months, 3 months down the line? So what is it that I want? What is the behavior change that I'm looking at? I think that becomes very essential to define. Now, once you define that, then you can say, okay, whether the program has had an impact, whether the behaviors are being seen or not seen. Then you can say whether the learning program is effective or not effective. But in the absence of a definition or a goal or a learning outcome, anything seems to be either good or not so good. And then the stakeholders will come back and say, "Hey, I think the program has not been very effective."
Right.
On what basis?
Right.
So it's important that we begin with a learning outcome. So these are the skills. This is the knowledge that will be imparted to the audience. And using this knowledge, I think these are the skills that will get demonstrated. And you can see this in certain behaviors, over a period of time, right?
Right.
And this is what is the starting point in any learning journey.
So you're saying before you build any program, right? Now, whether you're building an e-learning course or you set up an ELT-based learning course, you have to have a very clearly defined learning outcomes attached to that. Okay? We expect this kind of, so Jatish, could you give an example specifically of what learning outcome could be? So on a scale of 1 to 5, the person is 4 or 4.5 or 3 or whatever, right?
Sure. In the given scenario that you took up, even if you're looking at new hires in a retail space, for example,
right.
So there are both hard skills and soft skills that are required to be developed. And the people that you hire may or may not come with prior experience. So they may be even first timers, right? They may be absolutely, they may be taking this up as the first job. So you can't expect a newcomer who is absolutely fresh to demonstrate a very high degree of your product knowledge or process knowledge or all of that. Now that's the tall order to ask and to expect from a training program that lasts even 3 or 4 days a week.
Right.
However, what can be really observed is a change in behavior. Many a time, I see the first hurdle is the confidence that the retail associates would have to approach customers. And that's a big challenge, right? They haven't done that, especially if this is their first job. They haven't spoken to strangers, right? They're not in the habit of talking to strangers. So I think the first thing that learning outcome should look like is to say that, okay, at the end of this 2 days workshop, these audiences will feel more confident of approaching a customer, greeting them, the smile, and building that rapport with customers, for example.
Right.
And give that pleasant welcome to a customer.
Right.
That can itself become a learning outcome.
Right.
Yeah.
I know. Smile is very clear. I mean, you can see someone smiling or not. So.
Yeah. And these are behaviors that you can actually observe, especially in a space like retail. All behaviors can be observed.
Right.
And that is the reason why, when I have done learning initiatives, we've always looked at what are the observable behaviors and how they can be actually observed by a supervisor, and therefore build in some amount of coaching and all that for sustenance, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I think what we're really saying is that behaviors are observable. You can clearly articulate what you want to see in behavior change, and they can be very simple to begin with.
Right. So Jatish, I have one follow-up question. So this obviously, applies to trainings that have a very specific expected learning outcome. For somebody in sales could be negotiation, right? Somebody in pharma could be presenting or talking about their drugs to the to the medical store or to the doctors, right? What about trainings in this space of the statutory trainings, right? The recurring in nature, right? You have to just do it, right? Because that's what the law demands. Is there a way to measure the effectiveness of those training as well? Because we've seen a lot of time these, and by a lot I mean like 90% plus, right? Those trainings really happen because it has to happen, right? So check in the box. But you're investing time, effort, money in that as well. So is there a way to measure effectiveness of those as well?
So when it comes to statutory, Viraj, I think this is where you can actually apply many of these Kirkpatrick levels, right? For any training intervention, the first thing that you want to see is the reaction of the audience. How did the audience feel about this program, right? Did they find it useful? Do you think do they have the confidence to use these things that they've learned? And so on and so forth. So this is the first stage, which is the reaction level.
Right.
The second stage is to also check if there has been any knowledge transfer. Meaning, when they come in, what was their awareness on this subject, and when they finish the course, what is their awareness on the subject? Let's take, for example, POSH, which is one example of a statutory training that happens everywhere.
Yeah.
So you could do a pre assessment, pre-training quiz,
Yeah.
and you could do the training workshop, whatever length it is, and then do a post-assessment. So a pre-assessment and a post-assessment typically gives you the difference between these two will give you the delta. Has there been any knowledge transfer at all? Have they learned anything new? So that is only at the learning level.
Right.
Third level in Kirkpatrick is to see whether there is any change in behavior.
Right.
And that change in behavior is where coaching steps in typically. Because you can't observe your own behavior. Your manager has to observe your behavior and say, yes, Yatish is doing differently now, or Dheeraj has got more confidence, or he's now behaving in a different way. So that observation can only happen by either a superior, which is a supervisor, or at a broad level, whether the behavior change has happened or not. And then, of course, comes the fourth one, which is the business impact, right? So because the behavior has changed, has it really impacted the numbers? To answer your question, it fits in very well for all statutory training. You can go all the way up to at least level 3, which is what most organizations today are mature enough to handle.
Right.
Many organizations, I must say, don't have the required maturity to go to the 4th level and see whether there's a business impact. So if you have clearly defined what the outcome is, if you're saying that as a result of this training, I want to see fewer non-compliances.
Right. Nice.
Right. That is a learning objective.
Excellent.
So on at an organization level or at a department level, my non-compliance is, let's say, 4 out of 10.
Right.
I want to bring it down to 2 out of 10 this quarter, and then I want to move to, let's say, 1 out of 10. Right. So that is how you define learning outcomes.
Right. Super. I think this has been very, very insightful. A lot of points that you made, I think, will make a lot of sense to people in this space, especially your peers in the L&D leadership. So, Yatish, thanks again for your time this morning, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
So 4 key takeaways over here. Number 1, do not start any learning initiative, any investment, unless the learning outcomes have been very clearly articulated. Take time to do that. Number 2, the learning outcomes identified have to be very clearly measurable. It could be simple, yes or no. It could be an objective rating, numeric rating on a scale of 1 to 5, but measurable. Number 3, many times the learning outcome are also behavioral changes. Do not forget that. Identify what those are and list them down as the LOs or the learning objectives for that e-learning initiative. Number 4, refer to the Kirkpatrick's model to define the LOs in terms of A, the learner actually trying to use the newly acquired knowledge in their day-to-day activities. B, actual knowledge transfer as part of the course. This can be measured using the pre and post assessment on your potential LMS that you may have at your enterprise, and use that to find out whether there's been an actual change of the knowledge of the person internally. C, behavioral change when at their work that the supervisor can attest to. And finally, consider attaching certain business impacts as part of the learning outcomes. An example could be a reduced number of NCs or non-compliances as part of your next audit. We hope you found this useful. Until next time, take care.